Well, it's time for me to give you guys yet another free settings, preferenced free settings for movies. If you are somebody who has LG C10 or LG C1, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give you my movies preference settings, picture settings with HDR that I use for my movies. Whether it be watching it from a PlayStation 5 Blu-ray or Xbox Series X Blu-ray or Oppo 203 or 205 4K Blu-ray player. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and let me give you my settings step by step for the movies. For free. For free. So the preset we're going to use for the movies, it's going to be under Cinema Home. And that's where I'm going to give you my preference settings. We're watching Mad Max 4K Blu-ray movie on a C10 LG OLED. So let me give you the settings step by step. Under the Cinema Home preset. Alright, so first thing first, this is HDR cinema. We're watching HDR movie, so yes, your OLED light has to be set to maximum. And again, the same goes for contrast. It has to be set to maximum to take the advantage of peak brightness of this OLED for this HDR feature movie. Brightness, it's always set to 50 because we want to be able to see the definition of shadows. We do not want to move the brightness down below 50 or above 50. Otherwise, if we move it down below 50, we will crush the detail of the shadows and the black levels. If we move above 50, then we're gonna overbright the dark areas and the shadow detail. So where you want to be is right here in the middle. In the middle, that's where you want to be. Moving on. Sharpness at 0. Why? Well, you have a 4K movie. Even though I know it's a 2K intermediate upscale to 4K, I get it. It's a 2K upscale to 4K, but it doesn't matter. It's still at the very high bit rate and very high resolution. Even though it's not native 4K, but nonetheless, it's a 4K. And therefore, sharpness should be at 0. Why? I already talked about this. What gives the detail is the higher pixel count. The more pixels you have, the better the detail. And we already got a better detail here because we got not only a higher bit rate on the 4K Blu-ray, but at the same time we have a 2K to 4K intermediate. We got much higher resolution than just 1080p. So we got much better detail. So therefore, no reason for you to crank out the sharpness. Leave the sharpness at 0. Moving on. If you guys want to learn more about the digital sharpness, go to Google. Google is your friend and learn. You don't have to pay $5 for a guy who used to wear a mask and now he's a master calibrator. You don't need to be brainwashed by that kind of individual. Unless you're a simp and you want to waste money, that's up to you. But if you want to be smart, you can save your money and you can go ahead and learn yourself. Go straight to the source and educate yourself to understand how digital sharpness works and what it does. Now moving on to the color. The color, of course, I'm obeying professional calibrating rules. I don't want to oversaturate. Otherwise, this movie is going to look like a bunch of red lobsters running around. It's going to look like they're on Mars instead of a desert. So we want to keep the color at 50. I hope you guys are paying attention. If you're a professional calibrator and you're watching this, you will understand right away that I am obeying the calibrating rules. Even though I'm not using professional equipment, but I'm obeying the calibrating rules, the standards. They're set by professionals, certified. Now, this is a preference, and a bit of a tricky preference. Uh, yes, it would be better if I had a equipment to detect what would be the best possible temperature for the movie, but I am still obeying by the professional calibrators rules that color temperature should always be at the warm, and I left it at warm 30. It's not yellow as you might think that it's yellow, but it's just the right amount that my eyes can depict here. So I leave the color temperature at warm 30. Now, this is my preference. You know, you guys can move it down to warm 20 or warm 15 or warm 24. To me personally, warm 30 gives me that silver screen warmth experience for the movies, and that's what you want. You want that cinema movie experience. So warm 30. This is my preference. Now, moving on to the advanced controls. Dynamic contrast. You don't need this. You already have HDR, you already have OLED light, contrast, maxed out, and you already have dynamic tone mapping turned on. So you really don't need dynamic contrast filter. This is something you can use on a standard dynamic range, Blu-ray, DVD, 1080p, 1080i, or 720p, whatever. One of those standard videos. Dynamic color, this is a filter that you don't need. Turn that off. Color gamut, you want to make sure that your color gamut, it's always at automatic. So that way you don't have funky colors. Have everybody look like they spilled the color all over themselves, or look like a Red Lobsters. So you want the color gamut to be at automatic. Super resolution, you don't need this. You turn this off. This is only being used if you're watching a cable channel that's like, I don't know, 720p or 1080i interlace or something like that. So you don't need a super resolution. These are all the filters. You don't need these filters. Peak brightness, of course. You want to set it to high so you can squeeze as much as the this OLED light can put out in terms of peak brightness nits. So you keep it at high. I hope you guys are pausing the video, writing these settings down on a piece of paper or whatever. Moving on to picture options. Noise reduction, you don't need this, turn this off. MPEG noise reduction, this is filters, guys. These are the filters that are here to help you if you are watching some 480p or 720p scrambled low bitrate video, and you can use these filters to help you out a little bit, right? If you're watching something from VHS to digital, or from DVD converted to 4K upscaling, so that's what you want to use this for. It's just the filters for those types of videos that you might be watching. Black level, you want to keep the black level on automatic all the time, and I keep it at automatic at all times. Real cinema, you want to turn this on. So what this basically does, it adjusts the frame ratio in the same way that the movie was filmed. That means 24 frames per second, 24p. So that's what you're going to be watching at, the 24p. Majority of the movies are shot at 24 frames per second. Motion eye care, this is a filter you don't really need. True motion, you want to turn this off. And yes, Tom Cruise is right. All right? What Tom Cruise is telling you, it's right. You want to turn this off. Why? Because he is surrounded by professional cinema makers and professional calibrators that calibrate the big giant home cinemas and theaters and AMC theaters with IMAX. So true motion, you don't want that. Why? Because you're watching a movie at 24p, 24 frames per second. These movies are not shot at 120 frames per second or 60 frames per second. So you don't need a true motion. You want to turn this off. So that's it. I hope you guys are writing these settings down. So let's see how it looks. Let's take a look at this, shall we? Let's see how it looks. And it looks pretty darn good to me. Now keep in mind, you can judge this video based on YouTube compressed bitrate. The camera cannot depict what your own two eyes can see. So I suggest that you use these settings if you have C10 or C1. This will work on both C10 and C1. Well, there you have it. I gave you these settings for free. I didn't charge you $5, and you're welcome. Take care. See you in the next video. Cheers.